get started. Thank you for everyone coming along today. I'm sure a lot of you know who I am. Actually, I've been here for like 12 years now, so I'm a part of the furniture. But for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Robbie. I'm one of the personal trainers here at Ismails Howick. What we'll be doing today is going over managing shoulder pain. So if you came along to the back workshops that we did last year, me and Phil did about 3 of them last year, we were talking about back pain, and we're going to do a similar thing today. I'm going to tell you about things that I see and where we tend to go wrong when we're trying to address shoulder pain, and then give you guys some stuff that you can take away and apply it into your day-to-day life and into your workouts as well. So when we tend to think of shoulder pain, we think of weak muscles or trying to strengthen the posterior chain, and a lot of blame gets put on things like the rotator cuff. There's a little bit more to muscles that is going on with the shoulders. So for those of you who don't really know my backstory, it wasn't that long ago that I was in a lot of pain, so I'm no stranger to pain. I started off my PT career training everyone like they were bodybuilders, because I used to do bodybuilding competitions, so that's all I really knew. And with that came a lot of pain. So that's my spine there. I went to Los Angeles 1 year to go and train at Gold's Gym, and then I couldn't really make the most of it because the flight had really ruined my body. For years I'd been experiencing knee pain, back pain, shoulder issues, and a lot of sciatica. So the flight actually kind of wrecked my body to the point where I couldn't really walk that well. So I ended up going to see a chiropractor down in Santa Monica, and the first thing that he did was my x-ray. And he pointed out that I've got a slight amount of scoliosis on the right side of my spine. So my pelvis is hiked up on the right, and I've got compression through my lumbar spine. But what you can't see up here on this is the top of my thoracic and bottom of my cervical spine, which again has compression and is all contorted. So up until this point, I've just been addressing my body and my clients' bodies as muscles. So I've been doing lots of foam rolling, lots of stretching, and lots of mobility drills. All things that really got a little bit of progress, but nothing to the point where I thought, like it really should be where it is. Especially when you go into exercise and you start increasing that intensity again, and then those weird little niggles pop up, especially around shoulders and the lower back. So that led me to want to figure out, why do humans build these compensation patterns? Why do we move, or how do we move the way that we move? So I ended up studying with the Postural Restoration Institute in America, or PRI, which you learn there about how the human body is basically governed by the nervous system, and basically our environment, or how we think and feel, can have an effect on our range of motion and the power output and our force production. But what we'll really talk about today is another thing that I learned, is that the human body is a pressure system. So when we breathe in, it's quite normal, everyone knows, we expand, and then when we exhale, we compress in. So how well we do that will depend on how well, or how much range of motion we have available for our joints. And then if we have that range of motion available to our joints, then our muscles can respond accordingly to whatever it is that we're trying to do. Now, before we get right into it, I'm going to go straight into the deep end, just show you guys all the exercises for healthy, strong, and mobile shoulders. So everything here is all you need for your rotator cuff to be strong, for your shoulders to be healthy and mobile. But it's probably these things that you are looking at and thinking that this is what I do and this is what causes my shoulder pain. Maybe the exercise, or maybe even just the motion of reaching up or reaching behind you is what causes that pain for you. But it's not the exercise that is the issue, it's something else that's going on. It's usually our position or our ability to maintain expansion and maintain positions. Now, I'm sure we've all Googled exercises for shoulder pain. I know I have. And when we do that, we're going to get these things, which I'm sure everyone who has Googled this, or anyone who's really here, would know or get these, or at least tried these. So things like wall angels, which is getting your arms up on a wall and retracting your shoulders, taking your arms back up and down. Rows, because again, it's the thought of strengthening the posterior chain for our shoulders. Prone, Y's and T's. So there's a pattern here. Everything is trying to retract the shoulders and strengthen the posterior chain. Then we've got some stuff like rolling the arms up on the wall, planks, downward dog, but probably the biggest one is external and internal rotations for the shoulders. That's the one that is given out to everyone by specialists. It's probably the number one thing that comes up when you search on YouTube or Google for your shoulder pain. Because again, the rotator cuff is always blamed for the shoulders when it's actually just trying to do its best to support your shoulder. Because something else is going on that we're neglecting. Now, if you came to the back workshop last year, we did speak about a lot about the ribcage and how this needs to be the most dynamic, mobile thing in our body for basically everything to move. For our pelvis, for our spine, and definitely for our shoulders and our neck. But it's the one thing that we always overlook. The ribs need to move so that our scapula has something to sit up against. So here you usually see people where they have this rounded shoulders, or this appearance of a forward head posture. And then again, we'll go back to let's strengthen the posterior chain. But what's really going on there is these ribs up the front have just collapsed all the way in. So nothing's moving along here. And the big thing is, nothing's moving side to side. So everything pulls in and in and in. So we walk around like this, rather than having this motion available to us of our sternum being able to face multiple directions. Then what we often see is winging of the scapula. So someone's shoulder blade popping off the rib cage. What's happening there is now that the rib cage is pushed so far forward, it's completely collapsed along here, that now the scapula has nothing to actually glide against. So it has no foundation, so it just starts to lock up. And that's where you experience things like tight traps, tight lats, and all those muscles on the inside of your shoulder blades start to get really sore and you feel like you've got knots all through them. If we can get the rib cage moving well, then again our muscles can respond accordingly. But to expand the rib cage, we need to get our lungs moving. So everybody here, their lungs are moving, but there's portions and areas of the rib cage that stay compressed. For everyone it's a little bit different, but there can be some common areas. Air will just go to the area of least resistance, especially when everything is quite flared up. So we start to lose the ability to fully exhale. And it's not very often that we experience a full exhale. When we can go through a full exhalation, we're in a good ability or good position for everything to start to expand. When we exhale, we use our abdominals for what they're there for, which is respiration. So it helps bring the rib cage down. And then we maintain a bit of tension when we can breathe in the abdominals to allow air to come up into the rib cage to expand our lungs and get our diaphragm moving how it should. All right, we're just going to dive straight into some practical stuff where we will move over to the back of the room just to go through some things. But first I just want to explain to you what we're going to be doing. So a couple of very, very easy tests that you can do to see where you might need air the most. So if any of you guys have experienced shoulder pain, which you're here, so I'm guessing that you have, you've gone somewhere and they've probably taken you through some internal and external rotation tests. What they tell you is where you need air. So if we're going through a shoulder internal rotation test,
that's going to tell us that we likely need air at the top of the chest if we have limitation through there. So think of people who have shoulders that start to come forward. Again, that's air that can't get to the top of the rib cage and it can't move. Then if we're going to go through an external rotation test and we're getting limitation through external rotation, what that's going to tell you is you need air at the back of the rib cage. So if you think of when you're in group fitness classes or down on the gym floor and you're doing your overhead pressing and you get that little bit of shoulder pinching in your shoulders or even some back pain, it's likely because you don't have that external rotation available to you and you start arching even more. So what we end up doing is just doubling down on the issue of overly extending the spine, compressing the rib cage, because we don't have that ability to already expand these ribs, which should allow us just to sit a bit more comfortable when we're trying to do these exercises. Okay, let's all move to the back here, back of the room, and we're going to go through these tests. I'm going to talk you guys all through it. Don't worry if you're not sure what you're doing. Now, one side might feel a little bit different to the other side. That's completely normal. What I'll show you here is the 3 drills that we're going to do, and then we're going to retest your shoulders, see how the shoulders feel, how your neck feels. What I've picked for you here, we just tick a lot of boxes with these 3 drills. This one here is a 1990 bar reach, where we're looking to expand the back of the rib cage. It's usually what a lot of people need first. We're aiming to feel the abdominals through a full exhalation. That's all we really want to think about. Again, I'm going to talk you guys through all this. Secondly, we're going to go onto what's called crab breathing, which we'll probably just do on the floor, not seated on anything. This is to get air, or to encourage air to come to the top of the rib cage. Essentially, if we have our arms in an angle, we're going to have air going to the opposite way. So if our arms are out in front of us, it's likely that air is going to go back. If we have our arms behind us, it's likely that air is going to go forward. And then lastly, probably one of what I reckon is one of the most important is getting the ribs completely moving, or the rib cage completely moving from side to side. So we're learning to close off one side of the rib cage while we open up the other side of the rib cage, and then the same thing on the other side. Okay, we're going to all head back down onto the sides of the wall. So hopefully you got something out of that. You feel maybe a little bit more relief through the shoulders, through the neck, that whole area, maybe a little bit less tension. And if anything, you might feel a little bit more relaxed because the amount of exhaling that you're going. So any sort of yogi or anyone in that sort of realm area should know that prolonged exhales does help calm and relax the nervous system, which is just overall a good thing for any sort of pain throughout the body, or any sort of tension in muscles. Now, the poor ability to pressurize our body is definitely something that we need to do. Improving the ability to pressurize our body, like we just did, something we need to do and address. But there are so many more reasons for why we can experience chronic muscular pain or just general muscular pain in general. It's things that we don't think about or consider when our back starts hurting or our necks and shoulders start hurting. We just want to go, let's manually get in there and start to massage, start to stretch, start to foam roll. But we need to consider other things. Stress on the nervous system is a huge one. So that's what I tend to deal with a lot of people, as they go to work, they sit in traffic, they come here, and they've got all this financial stress or relationship stress, things like this. And then they come to the gym and think, I'm going to do a good thing by working out, which exercise is good, but it's still a stress on the body. And the nervous system doesn't really give a shit what kind of stress it is. It's still another compiled stress on top of stress. So something like what we just did is a great way to offload a lot of that stress and just empty the cup and make it so that when you come into the gym and you come to exercise, your body's actually a little bit more ready to handle some more things, to handle the stress of resistance training or an intense group fitness class. But again, so many other things like poor sleep quality, anxiety, depression, movement in general, and being just under-recovered or nutrition. So inflammation is a big one that can make our joints feel stiff, and then our muscles respond by feeling tight. And just exercise selection as well. That can be something that maybe you're not considering during your workouts, and it's affecting your shoulders or your ability to maintain positions to allow your shoulders to function well. So how could you really apply all of this to your day or to your workouts? The air pressure drills we just went through is something that, again, like I said, is great for relaxing and relieving tension. I really recommend people doing this before their workouts. Like I said, you're just offloading a lot of stuff. You're creating space for your joints to move. So a lot of the stuff we just did there is creating space for not only your shoulders but your spine to move better. So that when we do go into normal exercises of pushing and pulling, we've got that space available to us for our muscles to respond how they should. Otherwise, we tend to go into these exercises and we're already compressed in areas, and we try to do pulling, we try to do pushing, and then wonder why we end up doing some weird stuff on the bench with the bar going up on one angle, or why one shoulder hurts compared to the other one, because we might just be a little bit contorted, a little bit compressed. But then the big thing is we need to start to apply some of these concepts into our exercises. So learning to, or thinking about expanding the ribs and maintaining that expansion while you're doing something particularly like a press. Unless you're a power lifter, we shouldn't really be arching as much as you can and squeezing the shoulder blades together. Because the general public tends to do that because it's become popular in that sort of area. You can still get strong and build some muscle and just get generally fit by not arching the back like that, and it tends to be a bit easier on the shoulders for a lot of people. But those concepts can go into anything with squatting and deadlifting, any sort of hinge or squat pattern, learning how to exhale, learning how to inhale and expand the ribs to create space so our joints can move. It can get a little bit tricky when we go into things like the group fitness classes, because everything is so fast paced, and then fatigue starts to kick in, and then when fatigue kicks in, kind of regardless if it's up on the group fitness or down on here, it's a lot easier for us to lose these positions because we're out of breath. I did a seminar for all the group fitness instructors in the country last November, and that was a big one. They all tend to start to experience a lot of neck pain, a lot of pelvic issues, because they're so extended, because all their air just is rapid, they're talking a lot, and all their air just comes forward. So their bodies really need to learn how to pressurize. The similar thing for members, it can happen when you do a lot of group fitness classes. A big one with pushing is, or pulling as well actually, is most people don't allow the scapula to fully go around the rib cage. They tend to stop about here because they feel like their back is going to start rounding. But rounding the upper back is actually okay when we're going through exercise, and you've got that expansion like we just did with that bar there. So if you think of holding a cable or a dumbbell in front of you, and like you're going to do a row, if you allow that weight to pull you and actually wrap the scapula around the rib cage, it's going to allow you to retract the shoulders better. Because for most people, they're stuck in slight retraction, and then they try to pull back and they can't actually get anywhere because there's no more room for the scapula to move. So again, applying these concepts into your workouts. Okay, just to finish off with a couple of key takeaways, as I've banged on about for the last 40 minutes, our breathing mechanics influences our shoulder mobility. We want to start with a full exhalation through the mouth to empty the lungs and utilize the abdominals for what they're actually there for, which is respiration. When we can get the abdominals working for respiration, then we can start to strengthen them rather than trying to squeeze and hold planks and do all this core strengthening exercises where we're just creating a lot of tension, but we're not learning how to get the diaphragms moving and get the abdominals lengthening and contracting how they should. That's really number one that for a lot of people need to start with. Creating space and relaxation with air pressure drills, just like we did today, and then challenging that new space with resistance training. Because these are great, like I said, for relaxation, but we need to challenge the nervous system to maintain these new spaces that we've just created and made available for the body. All right. Just to finish off, if you would like to know more, you can scan this QR code and that will take you to all my contact details, my Instagram where I post a lot about this sort of stuff and other sort of tips around exercise and fitness, some products that I have available with a one-on-one training and some online options, and just more information in general about air pressure and ground pressure. And feel free to just reach out to any of us trainers here and ask us some questions. We're more than happy to help you out. We can be a little bit scary on the gym floor if we're focused, but we're very approachable. Just come up and say hello, and we'll do our best to help you with whatever you need. Yeah, cool. Again, thank you for coming out today. I hope you got something out of this. Yes.